Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and this is the summary for the day of 532 to 533 for the 9th to the 10th of August. For the Ukraine war or the special military operation in Ukraine, if you are looking from the Russian perspective. Let's start out with the one of the hottest fronts right now is actually in the Kupiansk front. At the Kupiansk front, this is Kupiansk. As you can see, this is Kupiansk. The Russian forces continue their Kupiansk offensive, fighting from Liman Pershi, Sinkivka region, Vyshana, around Ivanivka, Khyslivka, Kotelevka, and further south also at Novoselivsky. So there's probably also fighting reported at Pershotravneve, but it was not really mentioned in the sources. Fighting is reported at Liman Pershi on the 9th, according to the pro-Ukrainian source Deep State UA. At Sinkivka, there is rumors talking about the Russians have captured Sinkivka. This turned out to be false. This is fake news. It is rejected by basically all my trusted sources. Deep State UA, Raiba, and Surya Maps all says that no, this is not the case, and they have no confirmation that such an event had happened. Fighting is largely still in the northern part of Sinkivka, and so the fighting was happening on the 9th of August, and the Russian Defense Ministry did mention that the Ukrainians did try to counterattack up to 9 times. So the Ukrainians are defending very vigorously in this position around Sinkivka, and the fighting continues on the 10th of August with Raiba reporting that the fighting is very close to the outskirts of Sinkivka, and so far Ukrainians are reportedly taking heavy losses, so they are probably withdrawing a bit and to redo their lines, and probably the Russians are making a push closer and closer to Sinkivka as we speak. There is also some interesting information though that there is this geolocation of a video by Surya Maps talking about how the Russian are apparently bombarding this area here. And this actually makes it very contradicting to even from Surya Maps report that the Russian lines are supposedly have been much further in front, at least to this line, to the western part of Liman Pershi. So with bombardment in this location, that may suggest Ukrainians actually have certain position here. So currently, that's why this entire area here is now a massive gray zone. We are not so sure exactly what is happening over there. Fighting is reported towards Petropavlivka from Vyshana. This Petropavlivka. The fighting continues to be reported here by Deep State UA on the 9th, and on the 10th, fighting is reported by the Russian Defense Ministry themselves. The Zapad group of forces reported that the assault group of the 6th Combined Army has ejected some Ukrainian forces across certain positions along this front line. So the Russian forces are continue to make the push, and so fighting continues to be reported all the way here at the northeastern part of Ivanivka. This is reported by Surya Maps as well as in the, I think it's not Surya Maps, let me check again. Ukrainian Defense Ministry, they reported the fighting in the northeast of Ivanivka, and so this is 9th of August, and the Khyslivka also see fighting in the north of Khyslivka according to Surya Maps, and in their mapping they say that the Russians make some progress over here, as well as in the southeastern part of Kotelevka. Remlin, a pro-Russian source, mentioned about Russian forces entering Kotelevka, but tentatively I did not map his stuff just yet because nowadays he don't have a lot of sources per se, but we shall continue to monitor. Maybe he still have his sources, but just take note that there is a possibility that the Russian forces have entered Kotelevka. And that's all from over at the Kupiansk front. Situation is looking pretty bad there. Over at the Svatove front, in the northern flank, there is Ukrainian counterattack against Novoselivsky, which is captured by the Russian forces previously on 9th and on the 10th. This is reported by the Russian Defense Ministry. However, Myro Shinikov, the pro-Ukrainian source, reported that the Russians are making progress from on the western part of Novoselivsk. So in their latest report, on top of the 300 that was mentioned in this source, they added another 200, which is half a kilometers. In his report, he says that the Russians have used heavy artillery to force back the Ukrainians. So situation continues with the Russians continue to be pushing west of Novoselivsk, and probably the aim is to reach the water body here so that they can actually establish better defensive positions. There's also fighting reported south of Novoselivsk, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, with the Russian forces attacking at Novoselivsk region and in the south. So fighting is still ongoing. In the southern flank of the Svatove front, over at this Novoyehorivka region, that Novoyehorivka is further south. In the north of it, there is fighting reported at Nadia. This is reported by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. They say that the Russians conducted offensive operation near Nadia. So Nadia is this town here. Previously was rumored to be captured by the Russian forces a few weeks ago, but it turned out not to be true. And this is still ongoing. This is it. Just off Ryhorovka and Serhivka. Serhivka is the newly captured place by the Russians, and the Russians are now making this move. The Ukrainians are not reported to have to be counter-attacking this area here, as their previous counter-attack has failed. Moving on over at the Crimea front. At the Crimea front, we have Ukrainian fighting at Terny. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, on the 9th and on the 10th, they reported that the Ukrainians are attacking in the area of Terny. And within the Serebrentsky forestry, we do not have anything. However, we did have a report by the Russian Defense Ministry mentioning fighting near Krychorivka. Krychorivka is actually here, so I believe that the fighting is actually within the forest and probably around this river system here over the Seversky Donets River. And so that's probably where the fighting is being reported. Within the Sivers front, we have fighting reported at Bilohorivka. Myron Shinnikov, the pro-Ukrainian source, reported that there is fighting in the industrial zone at Bilohorivka, and the Russians are making slow progress, but progress nevertheless, probably around this area here. So this is the area that's probably fighting over at Bilohorivka. The town is still strongly under Ukrainian control. South of the Sivers front, we have fighting reported at Bilohorivka, which I assume, this by Russian Defense Ministry, which I assume is this one at the Donetsk one, which the Ukrainians are making an offensive in this direction. Both towns are called Bilohorivka, so I can only use indications like the Russian Defense Ministry. When they talk about the Luhansk one, they do put a bracket Luhansk behind Bilogorovka, so Bilogorovka. So this is how I differentiate. When they don't put it, it's probably the Donetsk one. And there is Russian offensive operations reported south of Rozdolivka. This is Rozdolivka, which the Ukrainians are having a very strong control here. The Russian forces attacked the south and managed to secure this area here, south of Rozdolivka. Previously, there is a Ukrainian salient going south as the Ukrainian forces was trying to push in this direction towards where's this place? Soleda. But so the Russians have basically recaptured the line, the defense line, and that's all from the Sivers front. Moving into the Bakhmut front. So this is Bakhmut city, which is under Russian control. In the northern flank of the Bakhmut front, there is Russian attack at Bodanivka, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, and this attack is over here. And then Surya Maps actually reported that the Russians are also attacking south of Bakhivka, and they managed to recapture this defense line along the water body, seemingly, which the Russians managed to recapture, which with this expansion of the control line, so previously was around here, the Russians push back the Ukrainian positions, which means that they have now created a better buffer zone for the protection of Yakhidne, and also managed to re-establish this defense line along the water body or the river, which is actually easier to defend. It's unclear if the Russians want to continue to push, or they are just wanting to establish back this defense line around the Bakhivka-Yakhidne line. There is also reported fighting at Bakhmut itself. or close to Bakhmut, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, as they mentioned at your most. So probably nothing much. There is also fighting reported near Ivanivsky. Now we are in the southern flank of the Bakhmut front, with the Russian Defense Ministry mentioned Krasnoye, which is actually Ivanivsky, saying that it repelled Ukrainian attack in this area here. Fighting is reported north of Klishchiivka. So this is Klishchiivka, where the Ukrainians are currently struggling to capture. In the north of Klishchiivka, the Russian Defense Ministry reported they repelled Ukrainian attack. And Surya Maps also reported the next day that there is a further advance by the Ukrainian forces. So the Ukrainian forces managed to capture this area here with their continued attack in the northern part of Klishchiivka. Reinforcement is reported near Klishchiivka according to Surya Maps on the 9th of August, which probably allowed the Ukrainians to continue this massive push in the north, and also keeping the line of putting pressure on the Russian forces at Klishchiivka. However, the Russians are making attempts to alleviate the pressure that is currently being felt on Klishchiivka, with fighting reported by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, where the Russians are making an attack. Ryba also reported that the Russian forces are repelling and are attacking the Ukrainian forces in the area of Klishchiivka to occupy and gain a foothold in the north, in the heights. So the Russians are actually making offensive action at Klishchiivka itself. So situation is extremely dynamic at the Klishchiivka region, with both sides actually making offensive in the same front line, and we shall see how this goes. Over at the southern side, we have fighting reported at Avdiivka, according to the Deep State UA. The Deep State UA pro-Ukrainian source did not mention about who is actually attacking, but based on the other sources, what is happening, and because they are talking about Klishchiivka Kupiansk line, Kupiansk is actually here. So this line here means that there is fighting over at Avdiivka itself as well, because the Russian forces actually made progress at Kupiansk. According to Surya Maps, the Russian forces managed to capture huge parts of the northwestern part of Kupiansk, with the Russian forces making a push and capture this area here. And they managed to secure this line, and this actually is going to be a problem for the Ukrainian forces, especially those that are currently fighting over at Avdiivka. The Russian forces, with their new lines over here, they can actually continue up the canal and actually stranded this Ukrainian forces, or encircle them, or cut off their reinforcement route south of Klishchiivka. So this is Klishchiivka is here. So this is the situation currently over at the southern flank of the Bakhmut front. Yeah, there's actually also fighting reported northeast of Druzhba, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry on the 9th. Which Druzhba is actually over here. This Druzhba northeast is actually in this direction, which means the Russians are actually making the push as well over this region here. This is threatening to negate all the hard-won progress of the Ukrainians in their Bakhmut offensive, and the Bakhmut offensive by the Ukrainians are pretty much only left with this part. So yeah, it's dying out definitely. Over at the Avdiivka front, there is fighting reported near Avdiivka, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, mentioning the fighting on the 9th and on the 10th. However, Russian Defense Ministry mentioned that the Ukrainians were attacking near Avdiivka on the 9th. So there is some fighting around this area here that we have no idea exactly in which direction. However, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry is very generous by telling us there is fighting reported southeast of Zheveny. So they say that the Russians are attacking southeastern part of Zheveny, and this is actually why I say generous, because they usually do not give a direction, and this helps us to kind of tell that the Russians are actually making a push in this area here. So yeah, so this is a pretty good change. I hope that it will continue. And that's all from the Avdiivka front. This Avdiivka, and this is Donetsk city. And over at Marinka, there is fighting reported at Marinka on the 9th and on the 10th, with the Russians continue their push over at Marinka. nothing particularly special about this. There is fighting reported at Novomikhailivka, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, saying that they repelled one attack on the 10th. And there, however, as per the Voleda region offensive by the Ukrainians, it is continuing. On the 9th of August, the Vostok group of forces reported that they have repelled an attack in the forward position of Mikhailsky. So the Ukrainians are attacking Mikhailsky. However, there's no reports of fighting on the 10th. So I wonder if this offensive has been abandoned or it's just regrouping currently happening on the Ukrainian side for this offensive around Voleda region. Moving into the Zaporizhzhia front. So this is Zaporizhzhia, and we have this entire front line is called the Zaporizhzhia front, with the Ukrainians making a push at Velika Novosilka as well as Robotyne region. At the Velika Novosilka sector, the Ukrainians continue their massive offensive against Urozhaine, and this is actually making progress for the Ukrainians. Russian Defense Ministry, DPA UA, as well as Surya Maps and Ryba. Basically, all of my primary sources reported this fighting at Urozhaine. And the report by Ryba mentioned that the Ukrainian forces managed to now have a foothold in the northern part of Urozhaine. However, the armored vehicles are unable to stay there as they get destroyed. But the infantries are still there. They managed to set up observation posts in the northern area, and the Russians currently is holding up mostly in the southern part, and this area is now becoming much more or less like a gray zone of sort. I'm not sure, but Urozhaine is definitely getting invaded and molested by the Ukrainian forces. You know, they are penetrating into Urozhaine, yeah. So the fighting continues on the 10th of August as well. Russian Defense Ministry, Vostok group of forces reported about the attack by the Ukrainians, which was supported by Ukrainian artillery. And then Ryba actually added more information, saying that the 37th Brigade combined two different detachments that was arguing with each other to continue the attack, but it has not been successful. So they also did mention the northern outskirts is under the Ukrainian, the southern is under the Russian forces. So there is a report by the Vostok group of forces on the 9th of August saying that the Ukrainian forces trying to cross the Mokryali River close to Makariivka. So this is Makariivka, and the Ukrainian forces are trying to cross the river, and probably either this place or they might be actually crossing down south here, just off Staromayorsky. I'm not sure. Maybe they're crossing this way, trying to penetrate into Urozhaine, or maybe this area, then they can penetrate through. Further up north would not make a lot of sense, so that would not be worth reporting. There is reinforcement reported northwest of Staromayorsky, according to Ryba, of the Ukrainian forces making reinforcement into this area here, probably to prepare for an offensive to secure Staromayorsky, to attack the flanks, which the Russians currently are holding a position. And over at Staromayorsky itself, there is fighting reported near Staromayorsky. Exact position is unclear. Ukrainian Defense Ministry said that the Russians are trying to restore lost position near Staromayorsky on both days, 9th and the 10th of August. Over at the Prione region, there is continued fighting over here. The Russian Defense Ministry and DPA UA mentioned about the fighting over here, where the Ukrainians are conducting combat reconnaissance around Prione region. The fighting is then continuing to be reported by the Vostok group of forces the next day, saying that there's an attack by the group of infantry in the forward position of Prione. So both attacks have not been successful by the Ukrainians, but the Russians are definitely under pressure in this area here. So that's all from the Velika Novosilka sector. Moving into the Orikhiv sector. At the Orikhiv sector, the Ukrainian forces expanded their control around the Robotyne region. Fighting is reported at Robotyne, according to the Russian Defense Ministry and Deep State UA. And what is more interesting, rather than the fighting over at Robotyne, which is pretty common, is the fanning out towards Verbove. So this is Verbove, and the Ukrainians are actually making progress in this direction. According to Surya Maps and Ryba, they reported that they are fighting and captured certain position that they probably lost some days ago towards Verbove. And with the mapping by Surya Maps, it does seem like the Ukrainian forces have captured this and this trench line. Previously they have secured this trench line. Now they have taken this one, this another one, and based on the mapping, it also means that the Ukrainians have captured this stronghold over here, where the Russians previously have this defensive stronghold around this position. So the Ukrainian forces is definitely making massive progress over in the northeastern part of Robotyne, and expanding their control, and that's give them a good safety zone around the center position, because if too close to Robotyne, that's a bit dangerous. But no, all this area here currently, all this area here is now much more safer for the Ukrainian forces to traverse. And so fighting is reported near Uspenivka on the 9th and on the 10th by the Russian Defense Ministry. In the last SITREP, I have no idea where is Uspenivka. Apparently it's right in front of me. It's basically a valley region. So yeah, so but the thing is, we're not sure when the Russian Defense Ministry talk about Uspenivka, is the Ukrainians attacking in this position or is it over here? So I basically currently map it around here because it does seems to make more sense given that the Ukrainians are making massive push in this direction, and this is just a pinning force. So it feels like the Ukrainians are making some push around Robotyne to pin the Russians in these positions, while the main thrust is actually towards Verbove, because trusting robots is really very painful, so they are going to trust another thing. So that seems to be working well. There is fighting reported south of Novodanilivka on the 9th of August, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, which means the Russians are actually making some attack in this direction, because if it's near Robotyne, they will have said north of Robotyne, but they say south of Novodanilivka, which means that the Russians are actually flanking the Ukrainian forces, but it didn't seem to work out for the Russians. And on top of that, we have reinforcement reported at Mala Tomashka. The 118th Mechanized Brigade of the 10th Army Corps has arrived. And this means that more reinforcements and more forces that's currently able to push. This major push over this area here is probably related to the reinforcement that I have been reporting a few SITREPs ago. And it looks like these forces that was previously over at Preobrazyanka and Omianik, Yehorivka, Shivano-Kresnitsia, Mala Tomashka. This area here, all these massive forces is now moving south, and they are supporting this attack towards Verbove. And that is probably why we are seeing this massive progress, because the numbers is a quality by its own. And previously, I think I also missed one report. There's a geolocation of Russian media reporting from Robotyne itself. So they are in the southern part of Robotyne, in this area here, and this is actually super daring by the Russian media. So the RIA, Rovostik, actually have their journalists basically right at the front line, essentially. So situation at the Orikhiv sector is definitely on the momentum. The momentum is on the Ukrainian side. So that's all for the Orikhiv front, Orikhiv sector at the Zaporizhzhia front. We have nothing over the Kupiansk sector. Moving into the southern front at the Kherson region, we have the Russians doing counterattack over at Kozachi Lahiri. So in the previous SITREP, we mentioned about the Ukrainians managed to land on the western part of Kozachi Lahiri, and they are there. It's pretty big force, around 40 men, something, I think 40-50 men, and the Russian forces is currently attacking them. So according to Ryba, they are currently doing clearing operations to take out the remnants of this landing force near Kozachi Lahiri, and so those that are hiding are then struck by the flamethrower system, the TOS-1A. So the Russians are making this push to clear out this beachhead. The Ukrainians managed to secure, but it doesn't look very secure right now. So let's see how this goes. I'm just glad that the Ryba is actually reporting this, because we don't really get much information about this front along the Dnipro River. And that's all from the summary. Just some conclusions. There's additional information that I want to share. The Ukrainian forces launched this massive drone attack towards Crimea. Around, I think, more than 10 drones. Most of them has been taken down by electronic warfare, and then they got shot down as well. Did not really do much things. And the Ukrainians also declare a no-sail zone along this entire area here. So they have their own 9-dash line. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, I failed. I draw too many lines. But basically, they're saying that the Black Sea is now out of bound for Russian forces. But this out of boundness only start on the 24th or 28th of this month. So not yet. It looks like they are still preparing. And this is definitely going to cause a lot of concern on the Russian side. And put into question about the safety of the voyage in the Black Sea. And I wonder if this is going to have some negative impact on Turkey itself, because it's basically their region at the same time. And of course, Russian vessels can always go along Sochi and down into Turkish waters to travel through the Istanbul. And would the Ukrainians actually take them out in Turkish water? That I'm not too sure, but I think this is actually a very interesting development. Otherwise, the Kupiansk front, the Russian offensive is still moving pretty decently well, and the Ukrainian lines continue to be under severe pressure, and it looks like it will break anytime. So that's one thing to note. And interesting is that the Russians continue their push in this direction, and this push is probably going for this crossing at Sinkove. So which is why this push is important on its own, whereas the push in the north, this actually is pinning. They pin the Ukrainians in this position, whereas this is actually the main push to cut off the roads and secure or encircle Kupiansk on the eastern part. And whether they will actually storm Kupiansk on its own, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's probably what the Russians is currently pushing in this area here. The Ukrainian Bakhmut offensive is becoming a Russian counter-offensive, with the Russian forces basically attacking in all areas here, with the Ukrainians mainly only fighting or pushing in a meaningful way in the northern part of Klishchiivka. So this is definitely a front to watch. Very interesting development over there. The rest of the front line is nothing much. The Voleda offensive by the Ukrainians towards Mikhailsk is looking like it's dead. And another part is the Velika Novosilka sector. The main thing is the Ukrainians are making better and better securing of this Staromayorsk region, it looks like to me, and they are definitely want to try to go to secure the buffer around Staromayorsk. This will definitely give the Ukrainian forces that is currently pushing Urozhaine a lot of relief, because currently the Russians are actually able to attack into Staromayorsk from Urozhaine direction if they choose to, and this is definitely going to make a lot of problems for the Ukrainian forces. And the Ukrainian forces basically having a foothold within the village is very important. However, will the Russians defend it like they defend Marinka and make this into another one of this never-ending battle? That depends. Whether the Russians will want to hold it in that way. But the Russians are indeed holding Prione in that way. So it looks like the Russians are very determined to hold this line. This line. They are definitely very determined to hold this line, because further south would probably be even more and more challenging, because there is water bodies around here. Further south, the water body will be all the way to Avdiivka and Robotyne. So that's a lot of land to lose. So maybe the Russians may not want this another PR disaster. But who cares? I think the Russians don't really care in that sense. Over at the Robotyne region is also very interesting, with the Ukrainians changing strategy, moving towards Verbove. So, and they are attacking along the trench line along the first line of defense. So as you can see, they have taken 2 lines already, and they are continuing to push this line. And as Verbove will be pretty challenging, as you can see, it is surrounded by major trench lines. So what I would imagine is the Ukrainians continue to secure this area here. At least this open region here, they will try to secure it so that they can actually have a better options to decide where to punch the Russian lines. Otherwise, tentatively, with just Robotyne like this, it looks very predictable. So expanding this front line would be pretty interesting, pretty meaningful, and they can even flank the south of Novoporovska. So otherwise, yeah, that's the conclusion for this SITREP. And this is the summary for the day of 532 to 533 for the 10, 9 and 10 of August. I just realized the camera moved. I'm so sorry if you just see some part of my face. And thank you for watching. Do press the like button, subscribe. Views are shitty nowadays. So yeah, if you want to support me, you can join Patreon to become a patron, a paying member, become a DPA officer or sergeant or general, and support my work, because I am not so stressed because of you guys that are supporting me on Patreon. So I'm not so pressured by this falling views, but that's how it is. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next update.